Welcome, everybody. Welcome to church today. It's so good to be together. What a great day to be singing. And I'm surprised with this weather that you guys made it out here. Honestly, I was worried about you. Getting the coats out, the sweaters. And if you're wondering, like, okay, when do we start Christmas? It's happened, okay? It's here. It's here. I'm sure the lobby will be decorated soon. And we're entering a brand new series. I'm excited about this series. Today we're going to start a series called The Names of God. Names, we're really going to be looking at what does God call himself? And one of probably the opening comments about this, I think with the series like this, if you were to spend the rest of your life only looking at the names of God, it would bless you. If all you did was dedicate your time, your energy to, I'm just going to dive in, I'm going to pick a name of God from the Bible, and I'm going to say, why is he called that? Why does he call himself that? Why does someone else call him that? What it's going to pull you to is going to pull you to narrative. It's going to pull you to a story about who he is and something he did. So what you'll learn is you'll learn character of God. And when we learn character of God, we know what he's like. We know what he's done. And we'll believe in what he says he will still do. And it will guide your life. It will help you with decisions. It will change your relationships. It will ground you. You will know yourself better. You will have peace because you know yourself better. You'll know your future, your destiny, what you're capable of. The one thing that you could dedicate your life to that would change your life more than anything else would be to know the names of God. There's nothing deeper than knowing someone's name. There's nothing more special than hearing your own name. They say one of the things that's most special about a child, when a child starts to understand who they are by their name and their face lights up and they start to have an idea that there's a meaning and a destiny for who they can be in the future based upon a name. We're going to look at just a few names over the next few weeks. And so while this is Thanksgiving week, we're all excited, pretty pumped. The kids are out of school. It's going to be great. 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 It is. I've got so many chores. Oh, it's going to be great. Got a list. It's going to be a Thanksgiving week. We're all excited about that. There are overtones of Christmas in this message. And so the names of God, today we're going to look at the name Jehova Jireh. Jehova Jireh. This is one of the names that we sing about. We've got this embedded in our song. Some of you might know right away. Oh, the Lord provides. Jehova Jireh, the Lord's providing. Actually, the word Jireh means to see the provision, to realize the provision, to come to know and understand. But physically, like I see it. I can see the provision of the Lord, Jehovah, our God. What kind of God? A God that helps us see and a God that provides. This phrase signifies God's role as a provider and protector. It assures all believers that even in a difficult situation, he is going to provide for you, Jehova Jireh. So I'm going to take us to what I think is one of the most critical texts in the Old Testament. I was actually looking at my Bible, and I went back to Genesis 22, our text for the day, because I just wondered, sometimes I will write, when's the last time I preached about this sermon? So we were in June 5th, 2022. It was not a Christmas message that day. That's the last time as a church we looked at this text. So we're going to dive into a story that maybe you know. I think it's one of the most Jesus-centered texts in the entire Bible. You're like, oh, it's in Genesis. This is a picture of Jesus. Jesus was here. Jesus walked this. This was a dress rehearsal for when he would come and move among us. So the Jehova Jireh text, this is when the name is given to God. It happens by Abraham. Let's read from Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am. That's Abraham's reply. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah and sacrifice him right there as a burnt offering on a mountain that I will show you. This is the opening of the story of Abraham taking his son Isaac to the region of Moriah, and he's going to just obey the Lord and sacrifice him. This has been depicted throughout the ages in paintings. And people have come to this text now for 4,000 years and thought about, well, what kind of God are you? What are you like? If this describes you, I don't know if I want to be in a really close relationship with you. These are the kind of things that you call people that you love to do. But we're going to see that as Abraham is in this relationship with the God that's revealing himself to Abraham, what kind of God he is. He asks Abraham to give him his only son, is said in here. And I look at that and I think about your week, my week, and God is very simply saying, here's what I want. I want everything from you. I want the things that you hope in. I want to remind you that it's been 100 years that Abram and Sarai have been barren. 100 years they've known no children. So he's saying, now that you finally have one child, I want all of your hope is on that child. All of the things that God has promised is on that child. God is essentially saying, what I want from you is for you to give back to me everything. All of your hope, everything that you're building your future on, everything that you want to come to pass, I want you to bring it. I think that if we're going to look at steps, and I would just challenge you, if you're taking notes today, if you're online, welcome. If you're going to take notes in your heart, take notes on your phone, whatever. God's name is Jehova Jireh. That is a seeing God, a God that provides. And there is a thing here that is, I think, in all of our lives. It is the tension of waiting. Jehova Jireh step number 1 is confronting the frustration of waiting. Abram had waited and waited and waited. He's finally 100 years old and he gets the son, and then that son gets to be old enough he can go on a journey with his father like this. And all that Abram has known is the frustration of waiting on God. Well, I just started thinking through people in the Bible who have a relationship with God like I do, like you do. And what was their experience? What was their Jireh step? Seeing, realizing the provision of God. That's Jireh. Seeing and having God provide for you. So what are the steps, the Jireh steps? The first one is confronting your frustration of waiting. Jacob loved Rachel. He waited 14 years to marry her. No, that's not how old they were, right? You're like, that's how long that he was in a courtship relationship working to marry her. Israel waited to be rescued in Egypt for 400 years. The Magi who come, we just saw the nativity guys who were dressed as the Magi, and we're going to have a nativity experience at Light Up Trinity. It's very special. And the Magi, they waited from the time of Daniel to the time of Jesus. As Daniel wrote about the coming Lord, 600 years. Father passing on to son, passing on to son, passing on to son. For 600 years, they waited for the coming of our Lord. David was anointed king and then ran for his life. He was king, anointed by God, and ran for his life from Saul for 15 years. How would that be? Coronation, you're king. Yeah, but you don't get any of the benefits. And by the way, you better run because he's going to kill you. 15 years he waited. Joseph waited in prison for 3 years. Was he on the way to being second in command and saving all of Egypt with his vision of storing up the grain in the 7 good years because the 7 low years were coming, the famine years? Yeah, but you know what his track was there? 3 years in prison. Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, waited 22 years to confront them and offer forgiveness and reconciliation. Those are a few examples from the Bible. Here's what I want to tell you. People that get into a relationship with God, I think they have to take a Jireh step. And you cannot have a moment of celebrating the provision of the Lord if you've never waited on the Lord. And I think some of us have an issue. And honestly, if you're not in a place where you've never been frustrated with God, I would say you're probably not in a relationship with him. Well, you saw it on the video. The hosses were very clear today. You know what happens in real relationship? Conflict. If you've never had conflict, you've never been frustrated, you've never been angry, if you're dating and you've never been in an argument, you better get up on that, okay? You just better find out how good you are at it. Because the relationship will not last if you cannot argue effectively, and there's appropriate ways to have conflict. And some of us are stuck in a place of anger. It's false humility, and you're saying, I'm not mad. Yes, you are. The best thing you could do at church today is just walk out of here and say, I'm mad at God, I didn't even know it. Great, now start to deal with that. Because you've been in a fake relationship saying, I'm not mad at God, and all the while you're frustrated because you're not worshiping Him. You've given up on Him. And this is just a charade. Jireh step number 1 is confronting the frustration of waiting. You're not talking about what really is going on with your relationship, which means you're stuck in a worthless, fake relationship. You're mad. No promotion, no friends, no breakthrough, no cash, no answers, no hope, no computers. Right? Sorry, this is a real thing in my life right now. Our school needs computers. There are people. I come to this story weekly in my life, and I carry it with me. Your breakthrough is knowing this story. When you're going to search the names of God and find out, oh, God, Jehova Jireh, yeah, God provides. No. Do you know the story of God's provision? Is it a part of your story? Step number 1 is confronting the frustration of waiting. Abraham had waited, and now God finally says, okay, you finally got it. I want you to go sacrifice him. What? Verse 3, we get his response. Early the next morning, right away, Abraham got up. He loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place that God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and he saw the place in the distance. 3 days. Significance. There's a ton of overlay here, pointing to Jesus and what Jesus would do. Verse 5, Abraham says to his servants, 2, like Jesus was crucified with 2 others, but only Jesus would go all the way through sinless. He says to the 2 servants that came, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship. That's what you call worship, is when you encounter your frustration and you deal with and you meet God and you see His provision. And Abraham is prophetically saying, no, we're going to encounter God. I'm going to have a meeting with God. I'm going to find out what God's going to do in my life. I got a moment. God's going to have to reconcile what He's teaching me, what He's leading me through. There's going to come a moment. And for him, it's going to be a worship moment. So his posture going into a moment of frustration with God is, I will worship. No matter what happens, worship will happen on this day. Look at the posture of his heart. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. He's pretty confident that God is going to do something in his life. There's going to be a provision. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. And he himself carried the fire and the knife as the 2 of them went together. Jireh step number 1 is you got to confront your frustration. Here's Jireh step, seeing the provision of the Lord. Here's Jireh step number 2. You have to go up the mountain. You have to go up the mountain. Well, I only know a God who disappoints. I only know a God who takes. I only know a God who doesn't answer. He has been a silent God in my life. If you're saying that, I want to tell you something I know about you. If that wells up in you, that attitude of, well, I've cried out to him and I've talked to him, and you know what his answer back to me is? Nothing, and I'm mad about it. That tells me one simple thing. You have not gone up the mountain. I mean, take this story in. I know this story. I've read the story. Are you living this story? Do you know this story so well that you're applying it in your life and you're saying, well, what is my mountain? Go up the mountain. We recently this year, and I've not talked a lot about it. I think it's because I've not emotionally been able to, but we hiked Kilimanjaro this year. It's a big mountain. We went up the mountain. Matter of fact, this text, I did a series, and here's a really kind of a boring video, really, but I want you to know we did it. We are at base camp. We're about 14,000 feet, I think, or so here. We're getting ready to start a 38-hour no sleep for 38 hours. all hiking 30 miles above 14,000 feet. And I read this story because we were getting ready to go up a mountain. And we were going to think about this story as we were walking up a literal mountain the whole way. I did a series of mountain talks because the entire Bible is actually a story of mountains. And in your life, God is calling you to go up the mountains. Like, wow, I don't know what to do with that metaphor. I don't know. Am I hiking right now? Do I have to get the gear? I just want to break it down for you. This week, I got an email from a leadership coach that I follow. I read one of his books. It's called The 5 a.m. Club, incredible book on leadership. And he says in his book, I was with a shipping container, a big magnet shipping group in the world. And he said, I had 1,000 CEOs of the largest companies of the world. And I had them in a room, and I was going to give them leadership training. And he said, here it is, guys. Get a Sabbath and obey it. And I thought to myself, I'm expecting like some cutting edge, brand new information, something I've never heard that's like, that's the secret. Like, they know all this crazy secret information, and I don't know any of this crazy secret information. And he steps up to the podium in front of the greatest leaders in the world, and he says, it's this simple. Obey God, have a Sabbath. And I thought about it this way with this point here. Because Abraham just went up the mountain. Early the next day, he got up and just went up the mountain because God said to go up the mountain. And if you're saying, I'm frustrated and he's not listening, he's not answering, I'm saying this to you, you've not gone up the mountain. You know what the mountain is for you? I'm just going to say what that leader said in that room last week. It's some simple things that you've said, I won't do that. I won't meditate on this word to where it becomes my story. And as Israel left Egypt, I know what it's like to leave Egypt. And when they wandered in the desert, I've been in that desert. And when the law came down and they could not live up to it, I felt the weight of it. And when all of the scripture for thousands of years waited for the birth of the king, and his name was Emmanuel, which means I will live with you, I celebrate that like it is the greatest trailer to the greatest story, to the greatest movie that has ever been played. It's in my mind, it's in my heart, and I cannot get it out. And every part of me celebrates who my God is, because he is a God that comes to me and lives in me. Come on. Have you done the work of going up the mountain? Because if you don't know that story, you've not gone up the mountain, and you're going to be frustrated for the rest of your life. Have you done the work of going up the mountain to submit yourself humbly to knowing people at church? Not being known. Not just coming and liking the worship or being impacted by a message, but serving somewhere. You can't come and be here on a Sunday, or be here for 4 Sundays, or be here for 10 years of Sundays and not hear people say everything changed when I did one thing, when I started to serve. When I started to say, God, I believe you're real, and I started to give. These are the simple things, and I feel like I'm looking at a group of 1,000 CEOs, and I'm like, hey, it's this simple. Just obey the Sabbath. And they're like, oh my goodness, I wanted some leadership points. I've got no new leadership points for you. I've got the old ones that we've been ignoring. And are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Going up the mountain, quite simply, is following some of these simple things. Maybe your next step simply is baptism, and you've never done it as an adult. You were sprinkled as a child. Praise God, your parents raised you in a home. But have you been obedient to that first step of saying, I believe you're real, and I'm going to follow all of your commands? Abraham did this in verse 7. He's walking up the hill. His son is carrying the wood. Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Father. Yes, my son. Abraham replied. The fire and the wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for this burnt offering? And Abraham answered, God himself. Man, talk about speaking 2,000 years into the future. God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And then the two of them walked along together. Jireh, the next Jireh step, number 3. The first one, confront your frustration, go up the mountain. But here's what you have to do as you're walking up the mountain. As you're doing these simple things in our faith that pull you into this narrative, that help you, Jehova Jireh, see his provision, realize and know his provision, is you must do this one thing. You must acknowledge him as the provider. It's not my efforts, it's not my skill, it's not my intellect, it's not my navigation, not my maneuvering, not my grit, my power, my resilience. I must mark my words and say this, it is yours. Yeah, God is going to maneuver in your life for one thing. He wants the win. God wants the win. Are you fighting for that? You know what's so incredible about this story is we all have a need. You have a need today as you show up here. I think we all resonate deeply with, oh man, I know what it's like to be frustrated with God. Or, hey, thank you, Pastor. Thank you for reminding me that going up the mountain are some of these simple Bible things. I got to get back to that. Thank you. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it. But we get to this point, and acknowledging him as the provider, I think the first part of that is, okay, yeah, while I'm in the struggle, I've got to be like, God's going to get the victory. God's going to get the victory. That's a great lesson. Mom to Mom, they've been talking about it. Our Mom to Mom group that meets here, I love that ministry. If you're not a part of it, find out about it. They changed the name to Together. Jennifer wanted to do that. She's not in the service, so I'm just going to tell you, it's Mom to Mom. That's what it is, okay? It is. But it's called Together, okay? They've talked about that always. Our night of worship that we recently had, if you came out to that, it was on fire. We talked about this one thing. Acknowledge God in all of your ways, and he will make a straight path. This idea is hard, and I think we get this. But what's missing in here is we walk into this room, we walk into this story right now today, and we're like, I know what my need is. I need this. And everything that you're pulling into the story is, God, how are you going to provide that thing that's so tangible that you need? In this story, and in your story, my story, our greatest need as we go up the mountain, that God will provide for himself, is atonement. Don't miss that point. You've got some needs. You've got some things that you've got to get done. Your greatest need is forgiveness of sins. And the more we start to realize we have that in Jesus, the smaller some of our other problems become. We say, I don't want my problems to get smaller. I want them solved. Well, when we have a growing understanding of atonement being our greatest need, it will start to solve all the other problems. Acknowledging him, Abraham is on his way to his worst day ever. When they reach the place that God had told them about, verse 9, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on the top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and he took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, Abraham replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now that I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Man, stop right there. God knows that we fear, believe he's real. God knows that we're in awe of him because we move our lives into a place that shows that we're living in such a way that his word is true and he's real. And he says, you've done that, you've obeyed me, and you've not withheld anything from me, and I know that you think I'm real. Verse 13, Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket, he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and he took the ram, and he sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. In the same way that Jesus was sacrificed instead of me. Jesus was sacrificed instead of you. This beautiful story, it's a Christmas story because it's the story, it's the practice run of Calvary. Verse 14, Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day, it is said this, on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. When you're walking up a mountain, when you're living in the story that the Lord has for you, and you're surrounding yourself with his people, and you're laying your life out before him, and you're treating him like he's real, here's what he will do. On that mountain life, taking those Jireh steps, Jireh steps to see, to know, to understand his provision. You're acknowledging that he is going to do it himself. Here's what he does on that mountain life. He provides for you. And Abraham simply met his provider. I think Jireh step number 4, the final Jireh step, is you have to meet your provider. There's a mountain that is calling you. It is a way of life from the Word of God, living in it. And he himself will provide on that. I think our disappointment in the Lord's provision reveals what we're worshiping. Have you been disappointed in how God has just answered some struggles and some frustrations in your life? And you're like, God, I gave you very clear instructions. I prayed about it, and I was like specific in the timing. I told you, I gave you colors, I literally put an Amazon wish list together. I don't know how you could miss this. There's a one-click buy button. Can you not figure that out? We're frustrated. Our frustration with God has revealed what we're worshiping, because when we're worshiping him, it's impossible for us to be frustrated with the provision he's given, because the provision he has given is Jesus. And technically what some of us are saying with our lives, our actions, and our disappointment is, I didn't want that. Yeah, I didn't want that. I had an idea of something that was better, and God is like, better than my son? Better than my one and only son? We think with immaturity, biblical immaturity. We say, I don't want to go up that mountain, and I don't want to have a real relationship with you. Because Jireh step number 4 is meet with your provider. Abraham was on a road up a mountain to meet with him, and he planned to meet with him. Some of us here, I'm going to say it as simple as I can as we close. We don't want to meet with God. Matter of fact, we're avoiding God because we're afraid that he's not going to give us the provision we want. And we're worshiping the provision we want. And when we see Jesus as the provision he's given, we're sad and disappointed. And so the intimacy with God, the real relationship with God that you are missing out on, you're missing out on meeting with him because you don't want to see and realize what he has for you. And there's an avoidance game going on, because we're afraid that we won't like what he really has. The gospel's in this message. This is the gospel that has been preached to you today. You see, Isaac carried the wood. And when Jesus walked up that mountain, he carried his own cross. Isaac was bound. We're told in all of the gospels that Jesus was bound, tied, led before the Sanhedrin and questioned. Isaac was an only son. Jesus was an only son, John 3:16. When they got to the top of the mountain, Abraham spoke 2,000 years into the future, and he saw the future, and he said, God himself will provide a ram. And right at the last moment, before Isaac was killed, Abraham was stopped by God, and God said, look, there's a lamb. The lamb he pointed to, I believe it to this day. I believe that Jesus was standing on that mountain, and it was a dress rehearsal for Calvary. And right next to that lamb had been led up by Jesus. And a crown of thorns from a thicket was placed on that lamb's head. And it held that ram for a moment for Abraham to come and get that ram. It was 2,000 years from the moment that dress rehearsal happened to Calvary. It's the same mountain. It tells us in verse 2 of this text that God said, I'm going to show you a mountain. The mountain that God showed him was Calvary. They did the dress rehearsal on Calvary. And Jesus walked up that hill, and he simply looked at the Father, and he said, the next time the Son will not be spared. Calvary is Mount Moriah. It is there to this day. And our Jesus was crucified on it. And he is the greatest provision that you could have. I imagine you show up here today, and we're going to sing this song. I throw up my hands. What do you come into Thanksgiving needing? What do you come into this season saying, I need this, and you're waiting in frustration? Man, do you think God doesn't get that frustration of waiting? don't think he sins in it, but he is a patient God. Just do the math. Just think about this. From Abraham to Jesus, 2,000 years. Jesus had to do a dress rehearsal and then wait 2,000 years to come and be obedient to cover our sin. And he did it. But now, today, he has waited another 2,000 years from the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the only Son of God. He has waited 2,000 years to come and get you, to come and get all the people who simply say this: I believe that Jesus is the Christ and the Son of the living God. Here's what, you will not convince me otherwise. It is only a God that sees all, knows all, and is capable of saving me that can write a dress rehearsal perfectly 2,000 years before it's fulfilled. If you look at Abraham leading Isaac up a mountain, and then you look at Jesus being led by the Spirit to obedience on Calvary, it is the same story. Only an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-capable God could do that. Why do I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God? Because the Bible tells me so. My question to you today is, what is the Bible telling you? What provision are you trying to get that's less than Jesus? This isn't a bait and switch. We're just going to read it. I want to ask you to stand before we sing. I want to read it. Because I don't want to, so I get it. So if I come and I accept Jesus instead of this other thing I need, I get Jesus, but I completely get the shaft on that deal. And people need that. People are counting on that. I've got responsibilities. I'm not asking for a bad thing. Well, I just want to let you know who our God is. Here's how it ends. Abraham got up, loaded his donkey, took his 2 servants and his son Isaac. Wait, no, I'm sorry. We already read that. That was great. Here it is, verse 15. Here's how it ends. It's the end of the chapter, friends. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time. And he said this: I swear by myself, declares the Lord, because you have done this and not withheld your son, your only son, I will bless you. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possessions of the cities and of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed, because you liked me. Oh, they must have the words on the screen behind me. Or you have it memorized. Or you're just used to hearing sermons at this church. Because I've only got one. It's because you obeyed me. Man, the shiny thing you want, it's probably a good thing. You probably want it because you need it. You probably want it because it's going to bless some people. It's probably awesome. I'd probably enjoy it with you. Or whatever it is, it'd be great. But it's not greater than Jesus. He's the best. And here's what happens. I'm just going to tell you what happened in the Word. When you put him in the rightful place he's supposed to be, all these things shall be added unto you. It's like I'm quoting the words of Jesus today. Seek first the kingdom of God, and that is Jesus. So today, we're going to sing the song. If you've never accepted him and put him in that number one position, go up that mountain. Or right now, go up that mountain and meet with him. It is a Jireh step, and you can see his provision and know it today. The provision is Jesus, and then all these things will be added unto you. Church, let's sing and let's respond.
So